और ये सर को यहाँ से पकड़।
शार दे कर दे हृदय सुंदर ही सुंदर, वंदना के कर मुखर स्वर। Namaskar. I welcome you all to the 3-day International Conference on Biotechnology and Nanotechnology organized by the Department of Biotechnology, the IIS University, under the auspices of the Indian Science Congress Association, Jaipur chapter, and sponsored by Indian Council for Medical Research. With potential applications in the areas of biomedical research, including drug development, nanomedicines, and cancer biology, to name a few, this conference would provide a forum for policymakers, service providers, program managers, and NGOs in the relevant fields to come together and exchange ideas and information. I welcome you all once again. It has been a glorious tradition of the IIS University to begin the day's proceedings by lighting the lamp and invoking the divine spirits. I therefore request our chief guest, Dr. S.J.S. Flora, to kindly light the lamp. I also request Dr. Ashok Gupta, Honorable Vice Chancellor, the IIS University, Dr. Rakhi Gupta, Registrar, the IIS University, Professor Pradeep Bhatnagar, Dean, Faculty of Science, Professor K.S. Sharma, Advisor, the IIS University, Professor N.K. Jain, Dean, Faculty of Arts, Dr. Shimoy Chatterjee, Convener, Dr. Nidhi Gupta, Organizing Secretary, and Dr. Payal Mehtani, Head, Department of Biotechnology, to please join him. I request Dr. Ashok Gupta, Honorable Vice Chancellor at IIS University, to welcome our chief guest, Dr. S.J.S. Flora, with flowers. Thank you, sir. I invite Dr. Ashok Gupta to deliver the welcome address.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the IIS University, I extend a very hearty welcome to all of you today when we commence with an international conference on biotechnology and nanotechnology being organized in collaboration with Indian Science Congress Association Jaipur and is sponsored by Indian Council for Medical Research. The IIS University is not a very old name in the educational arena of the country. It used to function as the International College for Girls until 2009, when it was declared deemed to be university by the Government of India. The review committee constituted by the MHRD put this university amongst the first 38 universities under category A. We are a multidisciplinary institution with arts, science, commerce, home science, fine arts, management, journalism, and all kinds of courses, even in fashion technology, and have over 5,000 students drawn from 26 states of India and some students from abroad also. It has proved itself by producing students who not only become good homemakers but try to be entrepreneurs or serve the country through various modes like joining the IAS, IPS, or even the armed forces, and some of them are self-employed entrepreneurs. So basically we train them, groom them for life, and see to it that they have an all-round personality grooming here. I am grateful to Dr. S.J.S. Flora. In fact, he is just like a member of the IIS University family, because whenever we bother him, he is here and he keeps on guiding us. I mean, he is a true academician and researcher who wants to promote research, who wants to promote academics selflessly. And he has been very kind to us for a number of years now, and welcoming him as the chief guest of this program, I feel honored. Nanotechnology is a multidisciplinary field that currently recruits approach, technology and facility available in conventional as well as advanced avenues of engineering, physics, chemistry and biology. It offers a wide range of uses in medicine. This conference, I'm sure, will provide a premier multidisciplinary forum for researchers, practitioners and academicians to present and discuss the recent innovations and trends in the field of biotechnology. I'm sure the participation of scientists from premier universities. We have a lady from Germany who has come all the way to attend this conference and has given it a color of an true international conference. Thank you very much. And it will be of immense benefit to delegates pursuing research interests and will go a long way in benefiting the society at large. So, ladies and gentlemen, I once again welcome you to the Ayaz University to this conference, and I'm sure this conference will prove to be a grand success in achieving the objectives that it has set. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I request Professor Pradeep Bhatnagar, Dean, Faculty of Science and Chairperson for the conference, to acquaint us with the aims and objectives of the conference.
Namaskar. It's my pleasure and honor to welcome Dr. S.J. Flora, Associate Director of the TRD, invited speaker, participant and guest in this 3 days International Conference on Biotechnology and Nanotechnology organized by the Department of Biotechnology of our university. The 21st century looks to biotechnology and nanotechnology as world's fastest growing and most rapidly changing techniques that can bring changes in the human population or for the human welfare in positive way. In fact, this century has been nicknamed as the era of biotechnology and the nanotechnology. Modern biotechnology enables an organism to produce a totally new product which the organism does not produce in its normal course of life. It is quite remarkable to note how different branches of biotechnology emerged to have both sustained academic, industrial impact in the development. The opportunities become wider and the hopes brighter. Modern biotechnology has opened up many opportunities in various sectors such as agriculture, food, forestry, waste treatment, medicine, and pharmaceutical production. To feed growing human population due to the shrinking cultivated land, it has been necessary to use new innovative techniques to procure high yield of crops in minimum time and space, and development of disease and insect pest resistance plants. Biotechnology techniques are applied especially by manipulating genetic material. Similarly, in the medical science, gene therapy is being considered as a good tool for the cure of many genetic related disorders. Development of genetic modified organism GMO for the betterment of product or cloning organism for getting high yield from them require manipulation of their genes. At this point, in my opinion, too much interference in nature is not advisable. We know that nature is supreme. There is a very fine balance exists between biotic components, among the biotic components, and between biotic and non-biotic components. This balance is a result of long evolutionary process of billions of years. Too much of interference with this process is not in our favor. At this stage, we do not know the real consequences of genetic manipulation in future. As we know that every technology is a double sword, this technology may be used for the development of biological weapon also. If so, it will be much more disaster than the nuclear weapons. Similarly, nanotechnology is very useful in various ways, like in medicines, target delivery of the drugs for the treatment of the cancer, and cosmetic products, etc. But we are still unaware about long-term toxic effects of the nanoparticles. We should always welcome and adopt new innovations, new technology, but with cautions. Remembering that Mother Nature is the supreme, she will not like her over-exploitation or unnecessary interference in her laws, which are established billion years of evolutionary process. Covering even most important aspect of the biotechnology along with nanotechnology in this 3-day conference is a very enormous challenges. In this 3 days conference, there will be 5 technical sessions in which 30 papers will be presented along with 16 invited talks. 77 posters will be displayed covering various themes and aspects of the conference. These technical and poster sessions also include award sessions for young researchers. Hope you will enjoy stay at Jaipur and take active part in the deliberation of the conference. Once again, I welcome to all in this IIS University and thank you very much for joining us. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir. I now request our chief guest, Dr. S.J.S. Flora, to release the abstract book of the 3-day international conference on biotechnology and nanotechnology. I request the dignitaries on the dais to kindly join him. Thank you all. To foster scientific curiosity and creativity in the students and faculty members, the IISU Chemical Association publishes a biannual newsletter, Science Spectrum. For the release of the current issue, I request Dr. S.J.S. Flora to do the honors. I request all the dignitaries on the dais to join him. I also request Dr. Manisha Patni and Dr. Vandana, faculty coordinators of Science Spectrum, to join the dignitaries for the release. The student coordinators comprise Ms. Richa Pundi, Ms. Kashmira, Ms. Megha and Ms. Shivani. Thank you all. Today we have amidst us Dr. S.J.S. Flora, a renowned and distinguished researcher. Dr. S.J.S. Flora, Scientist G, is Head, Regulatory Toxicology and Associate Director at Defence Research Development Establishment, Gwalior. He got his PhD in 1985 from Industrial Toxicology Research Centre, Lucknow, and was a postdoctoral research associate at Utah State University, USA. His most highlighted contribution has been the development of a new drug for therapy of chronic arsenic poisoning. He has 275 research papers of national and international repute to his credit, 3 patents, and more than 10,000 citations in international literature with a high H index of 45. He has published 3 books and is the associate editor of the editorial board of 27 international journals. He has been conferred with many prestigious awards like DRDO Scientist of the Year, Best New Technology, and Distinguished Scientist Lifetime Achievement Award, to name a few. He is also a Fellow of National Academy of Sciences. We welcome you, sir. May I now invite Dr. Flora to kindly deliver the keynote address.
Honorable Vice Chancellor of IAS University, Dr. Ashok Gupta ji, Dr. Rakhi Gupta ji, Professor Bhatnagar, Dr. Shimoy, senior faculty member from IAS, and many other senior faculty members, invited speakers, and dear students. Honestly, a little embarrassed at the beginning itself, because Professor Gupta initially said that they cheat me as part of IAS University, and then naming me as the chief guest is a bit embarrassing. So I have to ask Professor Gupta to decide whether I am part of IAS or I am a chief guest. But I am more happy to be a delegate rather than any other designation which has been given to me, because
a member of a family can also be a chief guest.
Okay, I take it. Okay, it's always, honestly speaking, it's always a pleasure to come to IAS. It's a routine statement which I am making. I say it from my heart. The reason is, the 2 things which I have seen in IAS University is, which really always urged me to keep coming to this university. One is the passion among the students. Many of these students have come to my lab and spent some time learning few techniques, and above all the faculty. And they are so passionate, and sometimes I really feel embarrassed that whether I really be able to help them in a way they want me to help. But led by another passionate Vice Chancellor and passionate Registrar, it's really something which you feel so happy about it, that I have never come across a university in India where you will find students and faculty members equally passionate about something. And little bit contribution which I can make to this university, perhaps I will be the luckiest person. And I hope some of the students one day will come to a stage where IAS University will feel proud of. And honestly speaking, I make this statement many times in the past, that it's the students which makes the university, not the university which will make the students. So keep that in mind, that it's your duty to see and always feel proud to be part of this great university. And in the years to come, I hope this university will rise to a bigger heights in that. And little contribution from my side certainly is always, they have all the right to come and ask me. Honestly speaking, again I've been asked to give a keynote address, and Dr. Shimoy asked me whether I have to give some PPT presentation. Honestly speaking, I have never been comfortable with this type of keynote addresses, because I'm more comfortable in sharing what I have done, and same thing which I'm going to do today. Because one thing I attracted me for this particular conference was that there is one area which is really very close to my heart, that is drug development. And I have spent about 34 years in this particular area, and I thought perhaps this could be a good stage to share with the delegates and as well as the students how my journey has been. And that young lady talked so much about my biodata. Perhaps I always keep saying that this biodata is always very, confusing. It never tells about the struggle one has gone through the career. And I must be honest with that, I have more down than up, I think, in my life. But this biodata only talks about ups, never talks about the downs. But it's always better to talk about the downs, because students may get carried away by saying, oh, sir has published 271 papers and this, that. It's not that easy, it's not that. But only thing which I always keep saying, and which I said at the beginning, is that you need only one thing in your life, and that will help you throughout your career. That is passion. Develop that passion. I am maybe superannuating, but I have never said that I am superannuating maybe from DRDO in a few months' time. But I am not superannuating from my research work. That is one thing. And I always see and tell people, and this is something which I have learned from my professor. He says, Flora, that the day you are going to superannuate from job or maybe from your life, till then you are a student of this science. You call yourself that you are a master of. And I always say that I have learned whatever little bit I have contributed in science is always I owe to my students who have been my teacher. And perhaps, to be honest with you, I started my career in chemistry, and coming to drug development and the neurotoxicity and that pharmacology, toxicology, it's all been my students. It's not that I'm trying to tell that students have been too passionate or to be too humble. The reason is that they are the one, once they come and they tell that, okay, I'm an MSc in pharmacology and I'm MSc in biochemistry or I'm MSc in biotechnology. Honestly, I never knew anything about biochemistry at the beginning. They only come, sir, I have learned this. And that, the learning which they have gone through in their master's degree, perhaps that has helped me in the work which I'm talking about, the drug development part. Drug development, to be honest with you, is one science perhaps it has been largely been neglected in this country. And honestly speaking, my next slide clearly will depict that how worse the situation has been in this country. You can see that first thing, innovation. You will see that so many molecules have come from universities, from academic institutions, and as you can I'm sorry. Next. As you can see, there are molecules which has come from academic institutions, from research institutions. Large number of it. If you go through the literature, I keep getting so many manuscripts every day from India and from developing countries, and they said, okay, this is a molecule, this is good for the treatment of diabetes, it is good for the treatment of typhoid, it is good for this. But what happens, during the preclinical stages when a person has to go through the animal studies, it starts decreasing. You can see from it starts with this, and then in the preclinical stages, most of the molecules, most of the drugs, so-called drugs, which they claim that they are the new treatment for the particular disease, it just died down. And phase one is after Drug Controller General of India approves a drug for clinical human trials. Most of the drugs, they just die its own death. Because the reason is that perhaps we have never been planning properly. Every day you can see that this herbal drug or herbal extract is good for diabetes. But what happens? Nobody knows about the active ingredient in that molecule. People don't even bother about those active ingredients. They are happy publishing 2-3 papers. I have also been publishing. But question is, what I have been taught by my teachers, my professors, that okay, if you have started a career, see to it that it comes to a logical end. And you see that every aspect of that drug or a molecule should be clearly be defined. And that perhaps one reason that the drug which I am going to talk about has come to the stage that it has now almost cleared phase 2 trial. Now, same is happening as you can see in most of the government institutions. They also start
And it's irony of the fact that most of it's, there may be some delegates from government institutes, so I don't really want to criticize anybody, but there are certain institutes which has the mandate to develop drugs. But tell me honestly, in 67 years of independence, how many drugs have come from government institutions? Not even one which has come in a stage. There are many which came in the market, but they were withdrawn for the reason that there were some shortcomings, there were some problems, and they were withdrawn after 3 years or 4 years of being in the market. And this is the reason that perhaps we lack something perhaps at the initial stages, that we have not gone through the entire research work properly. And as you can see that the pharma company, they start with, you can see that at the top there is only very small molecules, very 2-3 molecules. But pharma companies, they are very smart. They don't do much of the R&D, perhaps, to be honest with you. They pick up only those molecules. Perhaps they feel that it has already gone through most of the preclinical studies, and then they pick up those molecules, and they are sure about what they are going to do. And even their R&D perhaps is much better than ours. And you can see that in the initial stages there are only just few handful of molecules, but at the last stage the regulatory approval has been given, and the molecule has come into the market. The perhaps percentage is almost more than 80%. This is something perhaps the students have to look into it. And as very rightly Professor Bhatnagar has said, that now every day there are certain new things which are coming up, like nanomedicine, nanoparticles, these are perhaps another tools perhaps which are now in the domain. But you have to be very careful. I will touch upon only just 2 to 3 aspects. I will not go through most of the slides which I am trying to perhaps well brought. You can see that there are drug discovery process, which is a 3 main stages: the target selection and validation. First of all, I think you have to be sure about what you are targeting on. The disease, what is the mechanism of the disease? That is the most important part, where it goes and where it gets bind. These are, perhaps we lack this part perhaps. Once or before you decide that you have to go for a therapeutic molecule, or you want to go for a molecule for treatment of a particular disease, you have to be clear about it. I fully agree that there are stages where you feel desperate, and there are some pressure also, and I have also gone through that pressure, that at a top level they just, after 2 years, they just come and ask, oh, when we are going to see your molecule. So these are the stages, but you have to be clever enough, you have to be smart enough, you have to be courageous enough to face. Many times I have been in DRDO, and DRDO is under tremendous pressure these days that they have to come, they want us to come up with some product. But coming out of the product is easy to say, but it takes time. I still remember a time when one director came and he said, Flora, what you expect from me? I said, sir, only I expect is your patience. And he was little surprised, because most of other senior scientists, some says, okay sir, I need 2 crores, I said, somebody says I need some manpower, somebody says I need, sir, some instruments. And I was perhaps the person, I said, sir, I need your patience, because I was working on this particular molecule, and most of the pressure on me was to deliver. And deliver not in few years' time, they just want few months. Only they said, okay, I want this drug to come in the market in 10 months' time. So that's the knowledge which we have, even at a top level. I said, sir, if I have 100 questions to answer before I start working on this molecule, I have to answer all these 100 questions before I was. So you have to face the consequences of such type of answer which you have given. But it took almost 20 years or 18 years for me to bring this drug to phase 2 stage, phase 2 clinical trial stage. But there was a time when I never told anybody that I am working on this drug. I started working on some other product, but this passion to develop a drug never went out of my mind. I started my career in 79, and that was the thing which topic was given to me, to develop a drug. And my professor said, unless and until you come to a logical conclusion, never give up. And this is exactly what I did. Second was the discovery. Then you start about the molecule which you are working on, and try to see that what are the target, what are the receptors, what are the areas where you have to concentrate upon, and that you will only be able to work on until and unless you know the mechanism of the drug. So my first objective was to see the arsenic on which I was working on, what is the mechanism of action of arsenic. And initial stages, as per WHO, they say that it takes minimum 20 years and $300 million to bring a drug to the market. And this is the, I'm not really there to frighten you people, but only thing is that, yes, keep it in mind that you have to think of these problems which you have to come face unless before you start working on in drug development part. And then comes the drug candidate. There are 3 things or 4 things which I will just talk about. Define the unmet medical need. You have to first think that there is a disease and what are the things which are not known. And most of the problems in our country is that we keep on repeating the work which already had been done. Research doesn't mean that you have to do the same thing which has already been done or already there in the domain and start working on. And look for a small journal where you can just publish it. Perhaps I know that you cannot match with what Americans or the European or the people are there because they have the better facilities. But nobody stops you from thinking something innovative, new. And perhaps I am proud of that I have published in a class A journal just for the reason that I have been able to come out with a new idea. Nobody stops you from coming out with a new idea. And perhaps you can publish a paper in a A1 journal based on something new which you have developed and you have found. So you have to decide first what is the disease and what are the unmet medical needs in that particular disease. And then start working on. Understand the molecular mechanism of the disease. As I have said, you have to first of all decide what is the mechanism of action. If I have to develop a drug for arsenic, I should know that where it goes, where it binds, and what is the toxic mechanism of the drug, of the toxicant, before you decide about the molecule. Identify a therapeutic agent, that pathway, and then it can be gene, enzyme, receptor, ion channel. There are many, where it goes, where it binds. Once you know the mechanism by which a disease is producing the toxicity or the problems, then perhaps it is much easier to identify a molecule. And molecule identify is not that you will come out with one molecule one day. Perhaps you may have to scratch your head for maybe for a few years and try and may come out with a new molecule, but it will take time. I'll just, that is the reason why I wanted to share something which perhaps may be unknown for most of the students. Demonstrate the target is relevant to disease. Okay, now this is something which perhaps, this is the first stage comes where you have to do preclinical studies. Preclinical studies means that most of the studies you have to do in the animals. And animals, once you talk about animals, you may have to choose different models. It may be, like when I was working on arsenic, I choose rats, mice, and then I was asked to work on hamsters. You have to find a correct model, animal model for a particular disease. Because after 5 years of my studies, I found out that rats are not the correct model for arsenic. Because what happens, because I came to know through mechanism of action, there is an enzyme in the body which is called S-adenosylmethionine, which converts arsenic into methylated forms. And once it converts into methylated, that particular enzyme is not available in the rats. So once that enzyme is not there in the particular model, then how you are choosing a rat? Because rat doesn't have S-adenosylmethionine, and you require S-adenosylmethionine, which is there in a human. So after almost 5 years of my studies, I shifted to hamster, because hamsters is the best model for studying arsenic. I think I have to quickly go through the entire. Then comes the investigational new drug. When you have come out, you may have to encounter almost 8-9 new molecules, and out of those 8-9 molecules, you have to choose one, which is the best among all 8-9 molecules. And once you are through with all the therapeutic studies, it will take at least 5 to 10 years to do all the therapeutic studies, including knowing the mechanism of action of the drug on the receptors, on the gene, or whatever may the case in particular disease. then that molecules, once you are through with that particular molecule, that molecules you will go through the safety study. And that safety study again takes minimum 3 to 4 years, because then what you have to do, the molecule has to go through the entire process once again. That is what you call Schedule Y. Schedule Y talks about the effect of particular drug per se, without any disease, on the animals. And you have to choose 2 animals model, that is maybe rat and mice, and one non-rodent maybe species. Then 2 sets, male and say female, and the entire data has to be generated. That it includes teratogenicity, it may be reproductive toxicity, it may be your effect on brain, effect of all the organs about particular. That is the safety study. And then you have to go to DCGI with all the data and tell that, okay, now I'm through with this, I know everything about this particular molecule, I know everything about the disease, and then they will give permission, and then comes the phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 stage. Phase 1 talks about when the drug, effect of the drug is tested on normal subjects. Some volunteers are being given, and in my case, that this phase 1 trial is going on in Apollo Hospital in Ahmedabad, where almost 29 normal subjects been given my drug, and they have been kept in the hospital setup for 15 days, 14 days, whatever the Drug Controller General talks about. And then we have to see the effect of each and every organ, what is the kinetic of the drug, how much it stays, what is the T half-life of this drug, all the data which we have to generate in the human subject. That is this phase 1 trial. And then comes phase 2 and phase 3. Phase 2 is that now you have to try your drug in affected population, where almost 300 subjects you have to choose, in which you will have to study the drug in question and then find it out whether how effective is drug in humans. And then phase 3 is the number increases. You have to try the drug in almost 3,000 patients. And then comes the stage, that is phase 4, when it will come into the market, and then again it will be under question for 3 to 4 years, and if any adverse effects comes, then it has to be reported to DCGI. Now in 5 to 10 minutes, I think I won't take much time about clinical trials, which is approval. Now I'll go through about my journey, about 32 years of journey, how I started my journey for the drug development. I identified at the beginning itself in 1990 that there is a problem of arsenic poisoning in West Bengal and many other adjoining areas, where WHO says that there are 80 million people they are suffering with arsenic poisoning. And there is, the worst part is that there is no drug. No drug in this country particularly. There are drugs which are available in European countries, there are drugs which is available in US, but those drugs when they brought to our country, and we found out that these drugs are not effective. Not effective for the reason that most of the cases which were detected in our West Bengal and Bangladesh, they were all chronic cases. And the drug which I am talking about, which we brought from USA and from Europe, were only effective because their distribution is extracellular. It is effective because as long as the arsenic is there in the blood circulation. So once arsenic goes inside the cell, these drugs are unable to go inside the cell and take the arsenic out. So these drugs all failed in the clinical trial, and we are left with no choice. And as of now, there is no treatment for arsenic cases, which are now almost 110 million people in West Bengal and Bangladesh only. I'm not talking about globally. That is the scenario there. Perhaps if you have seen in NDTV about 2 months back, a half-an-hour capsule came where they talked so much about this problem, which is now raising its head every day. That is what the current situation is. And you can see that mostly problem is in West Bengal, but now it has creeped in UP, Bihar, even entire northeast. And even some reports have come from Maharashtra also, where a huge amount of arsenic has been reported in the groundwater. This is the worst part. This is what I certainly would like to talk about. Recently, this NDTV report provided evidence that Bhojpur district is near Patna, where in last 10 years, all the new infants, the newly born child, who has come, they are without eyes. They have fused eyes. eyes are not there, and they have attributed this problem to a huge amount of arsenic in the groundwater. And this is the situation. That situation is even worse than Bangladesh and West Bengal. Because in West Bengal and Bangladesh, the arsenic in groundwater was reported to be around 300 ppm, but in those cases in Bhojpur district it is almost 3,000. 3,000 ppm, and you can imagine, it's like a poison which we are giving to our population. This NDTV report which I just copied it. Now this is the problem. While the drugs which are there in Europe and in the US are not effective for the reason that in the preclinical stages, these all children are suffering. They are all like poisoned people, as children. But problem is that there is no symptoms. There is, absolutely you see that they are just like normal. Only thing is that once, if the problem becomes chronic, these children start showing symptoms. There is a what you call pigmentation, white pigmentation in the palm and many other areas of the body where you will find that the children are started showing, not only children, even adults have started showing the pigmentation, hyperpigmentation which you call. And in medical terminology it's called melanosis and leukomelanosis. And then comes the second stage. That second stage comes only after 10 to 15 years of continuous exposure to arsenic. And you can see that there are hyperkeratosis. From keratosis it becomes hyperkeratosis, and then the last stage is where there is no treatment whatsoever, and humans are left to die because the gangrene and many other skin cancers, it all starts developing. So the problem is that even at second stage or initial stages we do not have any drug to treat. So what mostly doctors start doing is that they start giving only symptomatic treatment. If they have pigmentation, they will give some cream, and they will just ask them to apply those cream and come out, and if there is some relief or not. This is still going on mostly in these areas. Another worst part is that even if you remove arsenic from the water, the cancer develops only after removal. As you can see, this is a report from Chile, and as long as you can see that when arsenic was there in the groundwater, it was high, and when authority took action, and then groundwater was almost devoid of arsenic, the cancer started developing. So, because cancer develops only after few years, so unless and until you remove arsenic from the system, chances of developing cancer, skin cancer, urinary bladder cancer are very, very, very high. This is the mechanism which I worked on. I will not talk about now in details. People say that is why this problem is there. The problem says it's a poor man's problem. Why they say poor man's problem? And this has been reported also in the literature. Reason is that mostly the poor are they are malnourished, undernourished, and because of that arsenic level is much higher than compared to a rich person. This is one reason. Research groups not taking initiative, and this is again irony of the fact there are many institutions in this country where the mandate is to work on toxicology or drug development, and you can tell me even one institute where people are working on developing a drug or even working on arsenic toxicity or metal toxicity. None. I think I really feel ashamed that they are more busy in working on some areas which perhaps fascinate the other countries, but rather than working on the problem which our country itself is facing. This is the irony of the fact. Non-profitable investment for pharmaceutical company. It took me 2 years to convince one company, pharmaceutical company, that please, I have a molecule, please collaborate with me and I want to develop. And they said, sir, kitna paisa milega, sir, how much I am going to get done? They only talk about $1 million. They don't talk. Anyway, it took some time for me to convince those people, and then they started collaborating with me. Limited funding. This is another problem, because if you apply for a grant to any institution or organization, there is hardly any chance of getting a grant, because they are more ready to give you grant on working on HIV or many other attractive areas rather than giving a funds to a problem which your country or your own country is facing. This is again, I'm a little critical, and I have, because this is my because I have faced this problem throughout my career. Simply unable. Even if you go to a doctor and say, sir, there is some spots are there on my palm, and he will give you some medicine. He will say, okay, So he will keep on giving you medicine, maybe for 6 months, even for a year. And once he is done with everything and he is left with no choice, then he will say, okay, go to some toxicology institute and find it out whether some problem is there because of arsenic, lead, or fluoride or something. Then only you will realize, oh, it is something, my blood arsenic level is very high. So this awareness is another big problem, even among the so-called medical practitioners and other literate people. Okay, now I started working on this drug. I think I have talked so much about this particular aspects, that chelation therapy. Chelation is a word, of course, I said many times I have said it's a Greek word, which means that you have to you need 2 molecules of a drug to capture 1 arsenic molecule. So I started working on this because these are the 2 drugs which were available in the market, DMSA and DMDS, and I found out that these 2 drugs which have been approved by US and Europe for the treatment of arsenic, and we brought this drug here. And they were found non-effective, as I said in the beginning. Why they were not effective? For the reason that they are only distributed extracellularly. They are there in the blood circulation only. They cannot get distributed inside the cell. And my problem was that most of the cases, even the 80 million people there, most of the cases were of chronic nature. And arsenic has gone deep into the cell, and you require a drug which should enter the cell and take the arsenic out. I started working on that, and almost 9 new analogs of this parent drug were prepared. So it's not that one day I clicked and I started working on this. Almost 9 analogs were prepared of this drug. And the idea was only very simple, chemistry was involved. I thought that, okay, this drug is not entering into the cell, and I learned and I read it during my BSc time in undergraduation, that in case you want a drug to enter the cell, it should be lipophilic in nature. And once it should be a lipophilic in nature, what you are required to do, you just increase the carbon chain length. So I thought that perhaps there are 2 carboxylic groups here, one here, and if I make esters of this, the carbon chain length will become higher, bigger, and it will enter the cell. Very simple chemistry and simple to say. And same thing I did. I prepared 9 esters of this drug, the drug which is there in US. But they are called diesters. And when these diesters were prepared, they worked very nicely, and they entered into the cell and took the arsenic out. But what happened subsequently was, because of diesters or because of lipophilicity, the drug itself became very toxic. And all my efforts of 5 years gone wasted, because I thought that the day I will go to DCI, they will say, no, this drug is very toxic, you will not approve it. So then I thought, okay, now what I should do? I thought, okay, now I should block 1 carboxyl group and only esterify another one. So then again 9 analogs, again I prepared. Again I tested all the 9 analogs in the animals. And then I came out with 1 molecule which worked wonderfully well, to be honest. And it worked it was specific to arsenic, it was not removing most of the other essential metals from the system, and compared to all other molecules. And then I will not go through all these, because then as I said at the beginning, that once you know the molecules and you are testing it in the animals, whatever questions comes in your mind, okay, whether it will go to the brain, whether it will go to the intracellular side, whether it will go to the bones, whether it will remove all these questions, whether it will reduce oxidative stress, whether it will reduce apoptosis, whether it will have any effect on DNA, what will have receptors, all questions perhaps has to be answered. And this is exactly what I did, and took another 10 years and another 200 papers which I published. I'm proud of this publication for the reason that they became my strength. I always thought that perhaps if I'm sending it to and this is exactly what I keep telling to IAS university faculty, I always used to send it to A1 journal, the top most journal in the field. I'll send it to that journal. Invariably it will be rejected. But what I'll get in return, almost 4 or 5 pages of comments. They will say, okay, now this lab paper lacks this paper lacks this paper lacks this. At least you can address those comments which has been. So who will teach me? Nobody will come and teach me. No, your work lacks this, your work lacks this. Nobody will talk about it. The students will never tell me, sir, aap kya kar rahe hain, gadbad. Nobody will come and tell me to open. So I thought the best teacher for me will be the journals. You send it to the A1 journal, they will send it to the topmost person in the field. He will review my paper, will give some comments, and those comments will become my strength. So once you have addressed all those questions, almost not all the questions, but at least 70% of the questions, at least you are assured of getting your paper published in A journal. If you are not A+, A journal, not topmost, but at least very near to the top. So that is actually the truth of my success. I always never was afraid of sending my papers and showing it not to my colleagues that, oh, paper has got rejected. But honestly speaking, one paper I submitted to Free Radical Biology and Medicine, a very high journal, and the comments, 9 pages of single space comments came. 9 pages of comments. But they were so invaluable comments perhaps. And perhaps my students, they always say, sir is brilliant. But I was not brilliant, but most of the questions they used to come from journals only, which we used to address. So please never be afraid of, if you have done something very religiously, very nicely, never bother about anybody, send it to good journal, and then at least you will get some comment. Anyway, so almost 100, 200 papers we published, and I'm honestly speaking in my best in my areas, and addressed all the questions. You can see that even mitochondrial dysfunction, this, that, neurotoxicity, everything we addressed. So once I am convinced that this drug is working wonderfully well for arsenic, and perhaps the best among all the new molecules. And then the second stage came when we have to see the toxicity of this drug in detail, not in just that you have to just go through some of the toxicological data. No, just GOT, GPT, not like that. We have to see that what Schedule Y asks us to do. And then I collaborated with so many in the institution also to generate data. And this is what we generated. It had no effect on liver. It has no effect on respiration system. And then we are almost, or not almost, we are done with almost. I was convinced that this drug itself has no toxicity, except for one toxicity, that was it was removing our copper also along with arsenic. So copper deficiency was one problem which I was to face. And I thought what to do with copper. Then somebody suggested, or rather one reviewer suggested, that it is better that you give your animals a week's rest to recover the copper loss. And it worked very nicely. To be honest, in the next study, what we did, we gave 5 days treatment and then given rest of almost 7 days to the animals, and all the copper loss was recovered. This part, of course, I must share with you that this is the first time, I think, in a drug development part, we tried our drug in embryonic stem cell, human embryonic stem cell, and it is published in Biochemical Pharmacology, again a very A+ journal. And the comment which came, although there were a number of comments which came, but what they suggested that this could be a new model for drug development. This was some of the comments which came was so encouraging. What we did, we took human embryonic stem cells and then tried this drug and compared it with pregnant rats and tried to see what is the difference between the two. And honestly speaking, you can see that there is hardly anything to choose between the two. So what I mean to say, we came very near to humans by studying the effect of drug on human embryonic stem cells. Okay, then pharmacology, all these aspects were studied, and then this was the safety profile of the drug. And then what we found, that compared to the original drug which is there, that is DMSA, which is now is an American approved drug, US FDA approved drug, our drug was little toxic. You can see this 1 gram, and the original drug is 13.2. So 1 gram compared to 13.2 is toxic. But Drug Controller General said, no problem, this 1000 milligram per kg LD50 is acceptable. No effect on any other organ, and then the drug, we submitted the protocol to Drug Controller General, and then it got approved. This is one aspect which I have done, and now the drug, then I took the industrial partner, Cadila Pharma is the one who are working with us. Phase 1 is over, phase 2 is already going on, and where we are studying, and so far so good, there is no problem. Absolutely, the drug is working very, very nicely in the human cases. I will touch upon just in 5 minutes time if Dr. Bhattacharya allows me, or Dr. Shimoyee. Just two, because this is important for students. There are 2 things which I'll talk. One is nanomedicine. We tried 2 things again. what we did, we tried to encapsulate, because this is a forum for nano encapsulation or nanotechnology and all. We tried two things. One was the combination treatment, and second was nano. I'll just in 2 to 3 slides I'll talk about what was combination treatment. Combination treatment is one where if you feel that your drug is a bit toxic, you reduce the amount of that drug and you combine it with a drug which is already approved. In my